Thank you for joining us on Rogers TV. Welcome to the local campaign. This is our debate in the riding of Ottawa South in the 2021 federal election. In just a moment, we're going to meet the 6 candidates who are here for the debate. But first, I'll just go over the rules very quickly. We're going to start with opening statements from each of the candidates. Each candidate will have 1 minute to speak to you about the issues that are the priorities for them. And we drew the order for those opening statements at random just before we began our telecast. After that, we'll enter into a series of debates about the important issues in this campaign, and in each case, I'll start the discussion by directing a question at one of the candidates. That candidate will have 45 seconds to answer the question. Then we'll open it up to several minutes of debate featuring all of the candidates. After that, when we wrap up that section, we'll go back to the candidate to whom the question was originally directed, and he or she will have 30 seconds to wrap up on that topic. We'll move through a number of different topics that way. Each candidate will get one question, and then we'll finish with closing statements, again 1 minute in length and in the reverse order of the opening statements. So let's meet the candidates who are here for our debate in Ottawa South. First, representing the New Democratic Party is Huda Mukbil. From the People's Party of Canada, Chylow Hall. From the Green Party, Les Schram. Representing the Conservative Party, Tannis. The Liberal Party of Canada is represented by David McGuinty. And from the Communist Party of Canada, Larry Wasslen. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us today for the debate. And let's begin with the opening statement from the NDP candidate, Huda Mukbil. Go ahead, you have 1 minute.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Huda Mukbil, and I'm your candidate for Ottawa South with the NDP. I moved to Ottawa some 30 years ago, went to Ridgemont and then Ridgemont High School, Carleton University. I got married here at St. Elias Banquet, and I had my kids here going to Greenboro Community Centre. I have deep roots in Ottawa South, and I am committed to change in Ottawa South. We have many crises before us. We have climate change. Our emissions have gone up in the past few years. We have social justice issues that have not been resolved for Indigenous communities, racialized communities, and others. And we have a housing crisis. And the poverty rate is very high in Ottawa South. So I'm here to tackle these issues. And I think that we need change in Ottawa South. Not just change from the Liberal dynasty, but real change in leadership and a stronger voice that will advocate on behalf of people. We at the NDP have the plans to do that because we put people first. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next up is the candidate for the People's Party of Canada, Chylow Hall. Go ahead, you have 1 minute.
My name is Chylow Hall. I'm the candidate for the People's Party of Canada, the PPC, Ottawa South. I'm a mother, a daughter, a professional, and a concerned citizen. We are a country built on democracy and freedom. Over the past 18 months, Canadians have been subjected to an unprecedented attack on our basic human liberties in the name of COVID-19. The current governments have destroyed the livelihoods and social fabric of millions. Lockdowns that were initially justified to flatten the curve in 2 weeks turned into an unattainable goal of achieving 100% vaccination mandates of the public. The divisive implementation of the vaccine passports is around the corner, and this government has yet to provide the facts and the evidence for all these measures. It is unconstitutional and is a violation of our Canadian Charter rights. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Les Schram is the Green Party candidate. You're next. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Les Schram, Green Party candidate. My wife and I have lived in Ottawa South for most of our lives. We have 3 children, all attended French primary and high schools in Ottawa South. Early on in my career, I worked as a manager in organizations dealing with youth poverty, addictions, and aggressive behavior. After I left the Employment and Social Services, I served 6 years on the board of an organization treating aggressive adolescents. I served 1 year as a chairperson. After working in social services, I served in the business sector as a self-employed benefits broker and consultant. And in this period, I served several years on the finance and audit committees of a publicly listed company. If you vote for me, you'll be voting for someone who has experience in both the public and private sectors. If you vote for me, you'll be voting for someone who works hard for his constituents. And if you vote for me, you'll be voting for a better social safety net, a better climate action plan, a sustainable economy, and a better quality of life. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next up is the Conservative candidate, Tannis. Go ahead, you have 1 minute.
Thank you, Mark. And welcome fellow candidates for joining us here tonight to discuss the upcoming federal election. The last 2 weeks, our team and I have knocked on over 4,000 doors, and the one prevalent issue that comes at the door the most is why are we having an election costing Canadian taxpayers $600 million during a fourth wave? Justin Trudeau is calling it for his own means. The $600 million could be better spent on health programs for Canadians. I'm a second-generation Lebanese. I've worked with my family and my mother for 42 years at Tannis Food Distributors. We've dealt with thousands of businesses over those years, and many are just recovering from the COVID crisis. We look forward to helping those businesses. I'm proud to be Canadian, and I look forward to being your Member of Parliament in the upcoming election.
Thank you. Next up is David McGuinty, the Liberal Party candidate. Go ahead.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much to Rogers for hosting this debate. It's been my great honour to serve as your Member of Parliament since 2004. I was born and raised in Ottawa South, and this is where Brigitte and I have happily raised our 4 children. I can tell you the great majority of my time is devoted to supporting members of our community, meeting the needs of thousands of constituents who need help with issues ranging from immigration to tax problems and from pensions to passports. And of course, recently, my team has been called upon to help our neighbours to cope with the challenges of COVID through a series of COVID measures which assisted individuals and businesses in these difficult times, such as through the CERB, the wage subsidy, reforms to EI, assistance for seniors, students, and our disabled neighbours. On Parliament Hill, I am proud to chair Canada's National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians. My greatest pride, however, is in working with you, the people of Ottawa South. I look forward to this evening's discussion.
Thank you. Finally, Larry Wasslen, who is the Communist Party of Canada candidate. Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Larry Wasslen, your Communist Party candidate in Ottawa South. No doubt you are wondering why we are even having an election with the 4th wave of COVID about to crash onto us. The Liberals want a majority, not to bring in childcare, not to tackle the climate catastrophe. They have been promising those for years. Lying Trudeau wants a majority government to bring in crushing austerity. The only thing worse than a Trudeau majority would be an O'Toole one. You know, the terrifying Tories, Mike Harris, Harper, Doug Ford. Aaron O'Toole will take a chainsaw to the critical social programs that we desperately need so he can balance the budget. It's up to us, it's up to you to deny both of these parties a majority. I spent all my adult working life in Ottawa South at the Children's Hospital as a registered nurse and at the Ottawa General. I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
All right, thank you, candidates, for your opening statements. We're going to move into our first debate topic. I'll address a question to Huda Mukbil, who is the NDP candidate. Over the past year and a half, there have been significantly fewer diagnosed major illnesses like cancer. And of course, that's not because fewer people have cancer, it's because of the pandemic, fewer people have actually been diagnosed. There has also been an extraordinary mental health toll that this pandemic has taken on Canadians, still largely unknown, the scope of that. What specifically can be done to address the rising health cost of this pandemic beyond the normal investments that would be made in healthcare, and how will you pay for those investments?
Mark, like you said, for cancer treatments, it's because of COVID, everything was closed and people were not getting the kind of support that they need, as well as for mental health support. At the NDP, we have plans for that. We believe that we need to be taxing the rich. People who are making over $10 million need to be paying their fair share of taxes so we can invest in programs for people and make sure that people are safe so that they can handle the pressures that everyone's going through nowadays. So an investment in healthcare and making sure that we close the loopholes on tax evaders. We make sure that we hold Revenue Canada, we give them the tools necessary so that they can fight tax evaders, ensure that FinTrack and money laundering.
Now.
Thank you.
Never before
has our healthcare system just focused on one issue, and that issue was COVID. And because of that, all the other issues were put you weren't able to get access to your health care. You weren't able to get access to hospitals. You couldn't see your doctor in person. I mean, all of these created mountains probably of death, which is concerning. And, the government is accountable for the safety of Canadians and their ability to access health care. So this needs to be addressed. We've been spending a lot of money into health care in the last 20 years and have little to show for it. We have the longest wait times. We have, a lot of doctors that you can't even find a doctor. You have a lot of people that are just going into emergency for things that could be seen by another, health a GP. And you have, the children that were locked at home and not being able to see their friends. I had this happen with my son. He really had a hard time with mental health, not being able to engage with his friends, not being able to, play his sports or go to school. All of these things impact our children way more than we ever will know. And we're going to see it over the next, 5 to 10 years, playing out in their school, the way that they interact with people, how they deal with their mental health is important, and we need to focus on our children, and we need to focus on the people that weren't able to access our healthcare system.
May I speak? Okay. We need a resilient healthcare system, and our system wasn't resilient in the face of COVID. That's why we had hospital delays, that's why diagnoses were delayed, that's why surgeries were delayed. So the Green Party proposes to immediately raise the funding for the Provincial Canadian Health Accord by 5.2%. But that's just an interim measure. We need to actually measure the amount of mental illness that there is out there. In the past, we said it was 1 in 5. With COVID, it may be more. We need to measure the amount of we already had hospital bed shortages before COVID. We need to build up more hospital beds. We need to build up the emergency capacity. And that may mean that we have to hire more doctors than we need on a daily basis. But we have to be prepared for emergencies. Governments have been notoriously terrible at dealing with emergencies. They failed to deal with the global financial crisis until it was far too late and too much damage had been done. Lessons were learned, and so the Liberals were smart, and they implemented a quantitative easing and eased the pain of this COVID on a financial basis. But we didn't learn about looking at the signs, the signs of emergencies coming. So we did not see COVID coming, even though the warning signs were there. We need to have.
I know other people want to get in.
Okay, I am finished then.
Yeah, let's let some other people talk. Whoever
The
wants.
conservative government pledges in the first 100 days of its mandate to increase healthcare transfer payments by 6%. That reflects about $60 billion over the next 10 years for the hospitals. Over the last 6 years, the federal funding to the provinces has gone down. When the healthcare was set up, the funding was supposed to be 50-50. Now it's at 34%. So we were pledged to work to get that number up so provinces can get more money to deliver the healthcare that people need in this city and province.
Over the last 18 months, we know that about half of Canadians have said that their mental health situation has worsened during the COVID crisis. Since 2015, we have increased and transferred about $5 billion to the province to deal with mental health because we know that mental health is health. And we're proposing now a new mental health care approach which would create a new Canada mental health transfer, a specific earmarked transfer to be able to assist our provinces to set up the kind of assistance that we need. Furthermore, we're proposing 10 days of paid sick leave for all federally regulated employees. That catches about 1.25 million Canadians at this stage, because we recognize now that mental health has got to be brought into the mainstream, into the daylight, and we have to deal with it the way we deal with other forms of health challenges. I'm encouraged by the approach of the brave Canadians who have come out and are sharing their experiences, particularly in these last difficult 18 months.
Can I go?
It's whoever wants to talk,
Yeah,
go right ahead.
So the
Throwing
thing
more
about,
money-
it's my turn here. Can I just say this? First of all, the main problem has been that the federal and the provincial governments have never tried to defeat the virus. Their only objective has been to maintain the economy and control the virus enough so that there's only X number of people are dying, but they can keep making profits for their friends. So that's the number one problem that we have to face. Privatization is another thing that both the Liberals and Tories are very good at. The Liberals are a little bit softer. They're kind of suave. They get it in. But the Tories are prepared to go, hammer it down. So another part of the mental health crisis is the fact that people are losing their jobs. They're losing their homes. Housing is a critical issue. So the answer to this is to defeat the virus and protect the people. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. That concludes our time for that discussion, which happened in a very orderly fashion. We just kind of moved down the line. It doesn't have to happen that way every time. It's a free-flowing discussion. You can jump in whenever you want. But Huda Mukbil, I addressed the question to you, so you get the final 30 seconds on this. Go ahead.
Look, only the NDP has a comprehensive health plan that's universal and publicly funded, and mental health is one of the key things in that program. So we know that mental health is affecting many Canadians, and we're saying that everyone should have access to counseling, and that we should address these inequalities that are the symptoms of mental health. But as well, the NDP is saying we need a pharmacare program, we need dental care, and all of these things do put stress on families. As the inflation rate has grown, things are getting expensive. Thank you.
All right, let's move to our next question for Chylow Hall, the People's Party of Canada candidate. Let's talk about economic recovery from the pandemic. What specific steps would you take to rebuild the economy after the pandemic?
So as we know, we have a crazy amount of debt. So what the People's Party of Canada position on that is to lower taxes for businesses and encourage saving and investment to make our economy more productive, eliminate all corporate subsidies, and offer inefficient government interventions such as bailouts and failing companies, reduce corporate income tax from 15% down to 10%, allowing people to invest in salaries and productivity improvements. All of these things that we're dealing with the economy is due to overspending from our governments. And we need to really, look at what all of this spending has gotten us. Where have we, gotten in these billions of dollars that we've spent? Have we helped people through COVID?
It's open to everyone now on this topic of economic recovery.
I think in the Liberal Party we understand there are two facets to the recovery. One is to make sure that our workers are properly supported and protected, and the other is to provide incentives and assistance for our businesses, particularly our small businesses. Small businesses account for over 98% of all Canadian companies. That is 100 employees or less. So we need to make sure that we work with them, which is why we're establishing, for example, a new career insurance benefit for those who've been working for 5 years for an employer and lose their jobs. We're going to increase the deduction you can claim on your income tax return if you choose to continue to work at home, which I'm hearing an awful lot from folks on the ground in Ottawa South. We're going to be helping small businesses grow with more support for their digital presence, because that's a very important part of their new normal and their new reality. We're also providing, on a climate change basis, much more tax incentive for companies that are producing zero-emission technologies. This is really important to incent the kind of investments we want to see so we can conquer global climate change markets.
The Conservative Party has an aggressive plan to rebuild Main Street. For small businesses, which all my life I've been dealing with small businesses, we're going to have for anyone that wants to start a new business, will be entitled for a $100,000 loan, and 25% will be forgivable. People that already have a business will be entitled to a $200,000 interest-free loan, and 25% will be refundable. We're also going to encourage, after the CEWS is over, we're going to pay up to a 50% rebate to those employers that hire new employees. Many of these measures are going to help the businesses succeed.
Okay. I would say that the way that we recover from COVID is simply to build the society from the bottom up instead of the top down. For far too long, we've had a top-down, a flow up and trickle-down economy. And what we really need to do is say, how do we help the poorest people? How do we help the small businesses? And the way you help and that comes to the issue of affordability. So we have to start by making sure that people actually have houses, that they actually can afford clothing, that they can actually afford medicine. So what we have to do is we have to start by saying, how do we get 10,000 people in Ottawa, for example, onto subsidized housing? There's a waiting list. Well, we have to build 10,000 houses. And we have to get those people in a proper situation so they can have a sustainable life, so that they can go forward in their life. We have to build the society so that it's a sharing economy, not a grab what I can economy. In the 80s, Reagan began to talk about trichonomics, or he talked about the Laffer curve. And the Laffer curve produced a society called a greed society, where greed was good. Well, greed isn't good. We need a sharing economy. We need to build from the bottom up. Let's stop giving money to corporations. Let's start dealing with executive compensation. It's way out of line, and only the government can deal with it. And they can deal with it by saying that you cannot give a bonus to an executive unless you give an equal percentage of bonus to the lowest paid incomes.
And we at the NDP, we want to reduce costs for small businesses. And that's why our benefits to employees program in terms of healthcare coverage will be exceptionally great. We can save employers up to $600 per employee per month, per year. We also want to reduce costs on wireless, fight telecommunication companies. In Canada here now, we're paying the 3rd highest rates in the world. So we want to be fighting to reduce these costs through legislation. We also want to make sure that transit is accessible and free, and people are able to go to their work in an affordable way. We want to make sure that we offer employment assistance programs during retraining. As the economy changes, we want people to be able to get their training they need to get back into work.
You'll notice that all of the colleagues here have, on one way or another, referred to support for business. Well, as the working class party in Ottawa, I think we have to look at supporting workers. First of all, the cost of living in Ottawa is incredible. Knocking on doors, 8 out of 10 families are telling me that they cannot afford rent, they cannot afford food. What we need is an aggressive plan to, first of all, raise wages, raise pensions. The Communist Party is calling for a $23 an hour minimum wage. We also need a full employment strategy. You know, you give money to this capitalist, you give money to the other one, and what do they do with it? You know, the boardrooms are sending their money to offshore bank accounts. So we need a full employment strategy. And all this idea about helping the corporations do this or do that. The federal government needs to get into the housing business. It needs to build houses so that affordability becomes possible for working class families. Thank you.
Okay, let's wrap up there, and I'll go back to Chylow Hall. You have the final 30 seconds on this. Go ahead.
We do not need the federal government involved in the housing industry. Canadian national debt surpassed $1 trillion for the first time. By getting rid of the deficit and ending the first mandate to cut corporate welfare, financial aid to state media such as CBC, and equalization payments and funding for programs which are provincial or municipal, we will be able to get back in line. Employees a lot were not able to access CERB. I've heard from many businesses that they were locked out of their accounts in getting that help. Stop investing in lockdowns.
That's time. Thank you. Next question is for Les Schram, the Green Party candidate. Opposition leaders and MPs have been critical of the government's performance in a couple of areas, including what's just happened in Afghanistan with the crisis there, and Canada's relationship with China, and the fact that there are still 2 Canadians, Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig, who are imprisoned in China. What would your party have done differently with these issues?
Well, hopefully our party would have seen the warning signs of the American pullout a bit sooner than we did, and we would have been able to get our Canadians out sooner. In terms of China, well, China is a huge force in the world, and negotiating with China is like a mouse negotiating with an elephant. It's a very, very difficult proposition. So I think what we have to do with China is slowly withdraw our economy, our exports to China, withdraw and slow down our imports from China, and start putting some economic pressure on them. We're a small player, but some pressure is better than no pressure when it comes to a force like China. Thank you.
Okay, it's open to everyone on this topic. Go ahead.
Afghanistan is a good issue. This is another example how the Liberal government does not react to the national defense. When COVID started, when COVID was breaking out in China, the Intelligence Division of National Defense reported to the Cabinet that there's a deadly pandemic coming around the world. The Liberals did nothing for 60 days. When we said close the borders in March, they said we were racist. That's it. Now we fast forward to Afghanistan. On July 8th, 3 generals wrote letters to the Minister of Defense. These are the list of the interpreters. These are their families. Get them out of Afghanistan. They sat on it for 6 weeks. We have a great military. We have great troops. And the Liberals didn't act. They waited till the government collapsed, and now we have thousands of interpreters and families. They're stuck in Afghanistan, fearing for their lives from the murderous Taliban. The Minister of the Cabinet calls them their brothers.
I know many veterans. My partner is a veteran, and when they look at what happened in Afghanistan, they wonder, what were we doing there for the last 20 years? You know, we had to evacuate and leave all of what we built, and for what? And we left people that were counting on us behind to die or be persecuted. All of this for what? And how much money did the Canadian government invest in Afghanistan just so we could leave it all behind and strand these people? It's devastating to see this.
We entered Afghanistan with many partners. In fact, 19 coalition partners were caught at the last minute and did not expect the speed with which the Taliban took over the country. Afghanistan is now split into different factions. ISIL is growing in prominence and in terror. We saw that only recently. It is unfair and untrue for my colleague from the Conservative Party to suggest that the intelligence unit at DND spoke about this some time ago. As the chair of the committee that actually conducted the review of intelligence at DND, that is just not the case. We're going to continue to help support Afghan citizens through humanitarian assistance. We're going to be increasing the number of eligible refugees from 20,000 to 40,000 because we believe we have a moral obligation. We're working now hand in glove with our partners, other coalition forces, to get many refugees out of Afghanistan using other exit strategies. With respect to China, Mark, you raised the question of our relationship with China. Canada has created a broad coalition of 65 countries that have supported our initiative to condemn and eradicate the practice of arbitrary detention, which is exactly what has happened here with both Canadian Michaels. Mm-hmm. We call out China, as we have been doing regularly, for this arbitrary detention practice. And we are actually working now feverishly with other countries to bring them to understand that this will not be tolerated by the modern Western world.
The incredible amnesia.
But it's okay. It's okay.
The incredible amnesia of my colleagues here are overlooking one very important item. First of all, the Afghans had their own revolution in the 70s and 80s, and the CIA, the Saudi intelligence and the Pakistani intelligence created the Taliban specifically to overthrow the progressive government in Afghanistan. This is another example, another classic example of the failure of NATO. They bombed Libya. They bombed one of the most prosperous African countries back to the Stone Age, and now there are slave markets there. And we have the collaboration of our intelligence, CSIS and others in doing those kinds of things. Canada needs an independent foreign policy. Meng Wanzhou was arrested so that Trump could negotiate a better deal with China, a better trade deal. And so, like, all of this sort of nonsense that's going back and forth about...
I wish you would be more red about
ignoring
Canada's
China.
In
China
Afghanistan
is the second largest economy in the world. It would be a big mistake for Canada to ignore trading with China. Thank you.
I wish you were more red on Canada's involvement in Afghanistan pre the NATO coalition. We were not there. That's a fact.
I'm just talking about the CIA and Pakistani.
One at a time, thank you.
Secondly, on Afghanistan, Canada was not prepared. The Americans also weren't prepared. But Canada should have had a better response. And we didn't because this government wanted elections and wanted to focus on elections and on the same day announced both, and that's shameful. It's also shameful that Canadians were stranded. They were told to go to Kabul airport, and documents were required of them. People are fleeing war and being murdered.
The best response
And
for
so-
Canada was never to go into Afghanistan,
Okay.
period.
That's time. Thank you. Les Schram, I asked you the question. You get the last 30 seconds on this.
We're going back to this whole thing about why did we respond so late? Well, once again, it's because when we get intelligence reports, when we get reports that say, here's the best case scenario, here's the middle case scenario, and here's the worst case scenario, and we consistently plan for the best case scenario. So the best case scenario is the Afghan government will stand tall, and the military forces will stand up, and everything will be good because we'll be able to get everything right. But the reality is the worst case happens far too often. So we should have looked at the worst case scenario and started to plan to get them out much earlier. A Green government will be looking at scenarios, and we will be acting on security
Okay,
issues.
that's time. Thank you.
Okay.
Next question is for Eli Tannis, the Conservative candidate. There have been a number of reports that have come out recently indicating the increasing severity of the climate change crisis. Given those reports, why is the Conservative Party not proposing higher reduction targets for emissions?
Well, first of all, we've come out with a new climate change plan. We have to be careful when converting from fossil fuels to green energy. There's 3,000 companies in Canada employing in the fossil fuel, in the oil and gas industry, employing 500,000 people, represents 20% of our exports, contributes 12% to our GDP. So we just can't flick a switch and go from, we're the government that signed the Paris Climate Accord for 2030, and we pledged to meet it. And we can meet these targets. Just recently, GM had a recall, $1.8 billion on their electric cars.
Okay, it's open to everyone now.
Our government has been pursuing a climate change plan for the past 6 years. It is important to have a target, but it's really important to have a plan. Let me illustrate in terms of what we're doing locally. Our government has invested $1.1 billion in Phase 2 of light rail. I had the privilege of negotiating on behalf of the City of Ottawa and the National Capital Region that contribution. Just recently, our government increased our donation, our support for the Ottawa International Airport for an additional $13 million to connect the light rail project to our airport and complete that project. Our government is, through the Infrastructure Bank, purchasing 450 zero-emission buses for OC Transpo's fleet because we're working to make Ottawa the greenest G8 capital in the world. Now, the Conservatives plan to do away with the Infrastructure Bank, which will compromise, of course, that funding. And finally, Mark, the other thing that we're doing is we are actually building a district heating and cooling system in downtown Ottawa and Gatineau underground, which will make all federal government buildings net zero in terms of emissions by 2027.
Mark, I care very much about the planet. I want my children to have clean water. I want them to be living and breathing healthy air. And the Liberals have failed us on climate change. We have the highest emission rates in all of the G7 countries per capita, and this is under the Liberals. We need real change on climate crisis, what it is. The UN called it Code Red for Humanity. We need to make sure that we're at zero net, and we need to make sure that we have accountability framework and annual audits on this to make sure that we are meeting our goals. And we need to crack down on companies that are not meeting their obligations. We need to take this seriously before it's too late.
27 different models, our government chooses the worst one. Since the 1970s, we have had all kinds of different predictions, such as CO2 levels rising, disappearance of polar ice caps, rising ocean levels, and increase of catastrophic weather. None of these predictions have come true. There's much similarities to the way the government has handled the climate change in parallel to the way it's handled COVID. There's no room for discussion. There's no room for debate. We as Canadians basically have a zero carbon footprint. Our gas prices are up to $1.40 a liter. This affects everything. This affects the cost of our groceries. This affects the cost of our living, our heating, everything. We plan on stopping the spending of $1 billion abroad to developing countries to reduce their emissions, abolish the Liberal carbon tax, and leave it to provincial governments to reduce emissions if they want. Invest in adaptive strategies to problems that arise as a result of natural climate change. Implement practical solutions to make Canada's air, water, sewer cleaner, including bringing clean drinking water to remote First Nation communities.
What we've just heard, Mark, what we've just heard from our colleague in the PPC is classic climate change denial.
It's not denial.
Bringing in a carbon tax and pricing carbon pollution is the #1 measure that economists worldwide have been advising countries everywhere to do in order to internalize the costs of pollution into economic decision making. That's why we introduced it, and we were fought all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada by 5 separate Conservative provincial governments.
What does
and
the
the Supreme
carbon
Court of
tax
Canada
do?
upheld
What
it.
does it pay for?
So here we have,
So we are moving
What does it pay
forward.
for?
We are moving forward.
what
with
we
a
are having
plan
here,
Carbon
what we
tax
have
is a
here,
slush fund for the
that
What
will,
we
government.
for
have
example,
here-
I'm going to
23
jump
by
in.
tw-
I just
by
want to
20
make sure that other candidates,
Sure.
there's
Yeah.
two candidates who haven't
just
spoken
finish my
yet.
sentence.
So
I could,
so
Mark.
first of all,
I'll split
what
up
we
the
have
time.
here,
Larry Wasslen, and then after that,
yeah,
Les
so what
Schram.
we have here is the Conservative Party being careful with their climate change. Western Canada is burning. There's floods everywhere. This is not the time to be careful with climate change. This is the time to be bold about it. What we need to do is we need to have we need to nationalize these petroleum companies. We need to put them under public ownership and democratic control. We need to move swiftly to green energy. We need to guarantee the jobs of the laid-off workers. We
All right.
must be, and the thing about the
Okay, I'm going to
targets
stop
of
you there
the
just because
Liberals
we're short
is
on
that
time.
they set targets and they don't follow
Thank
them.
you. Les Schram, we'll
First
give
of
you
all, let
the
me
final
applaud
30
the Liberals
seconds.
for their carbon fee and dividend. I think it's a wonderful plan. Let me thank them for doing a lot of wonderful stuff on the consumer side of climate change. But you know, Mark Carney, the former Bank of Canada governor, former Bank of England governor, Bill Gates, an entrepreneur of note, and the International Panel on Climate Change all agree that all of this is not enough. You cannot do this alone. You must reduce carbon production.
Okay.
That means stopping the fuel from being
Trees need
extracted.
carbon.
That's time. So I'll go back to Eli Tannis. You have the final 30
Thank
seconds
you.
on this
Quickly, I
topic.
just want to correct my honourable MP that I guess you don't follow Aaron O'Toole. He made an announcement out in Canada that he's going to extend the LRT funding. And secondly, we've had 3 agencies that have looked at our carbon plan. A credible path to meet Canada's 2030 Paris targets. Michael Bernstein, Executive Director of Clean Prosperity. A serious plan. Nick Rivers, Associate Professor, University of Ottawa, Canadian Research Chair in Climate and Energy Policy.
Okay,
Globe
that's
and
time.
Mail,
That's
deeply
time.
flawed
Thank you.
plan.
That's time. Thank you. Let's move to the next question, which I'll direct to David McGuinty. Justin Trudeau has described this as the most important election since the Second World War. But why was this election necessary? What is it that you're proposing that you couldn't have accomplished if you'd simply stayed in government?
Thank you for the question. And it is clear that over the last 2 years, it has been exceedingly difficult to move our plan through Parliament. The level of obstructionism from the Conservative Party, in my view, has reached unprecedented heights. And I speak as a former House leader in the House of Commons. Secondly, we are proposing major changes for the future of the country, not just for the next 18 months, but for the next 18 years. And we believed it's important, we do believe it's important to go to Canadians and ask them to consider what we're proposing as we move forward with a change agenda, a progressive agenda, an inclusive agenda to make Canada fairer, more equitable,
It's open to
with more
everyone now.
opportunity.
Who would spend $400 billion? And by the way, the Conservatives supported all the measures that were extended to Canadians and businesses. Who would spend $400 billion to fight COVID, help the provinces, help the people, help businesses get through it, get the vaccine, get people vaccinated, and then call an election during the 4th wave? More people are going to catch the virus, more people will get hospitalized, and people will die.
So the reason
Is that what they wanted?
I think the reason why more people are getting infected right now is because there are a number of individuals who refuse to get vaccinated.
It has nothing to
And-
do with
and your
anybody
party-
refusing
and
to
the
get
Conservative
vaccinated.
Party- the Conservative
In fact,
Party
the reason why the
refuses-
PPC is
You have 30
started,
seconds
The
later to
Conservative
respond.
Party
Okay.
refuses to even have its own candidates get vaccinated.
But the
before they
Liberals
knock on
too. You
doors.
guys just keep it secret as usual.
That's not true.
There's
It
a lot
is
of
true.
bickering.
That's
Canada
There's a lot
that
of
we want?
There's a lot of
Do we
bickering
want to
going on here.
separate a separate Canada?
But let's get right to the point.
No, let's get to the
Okay.
point.
Why
Let's
did
talk
the
about
why did the
people
Liberals
Time,
call
please.
the election?
Go ahead.
Why did the Liberals call the election? This is a playbook that many governments have done it. The NDP called an election in BC. No need to do it. They wanted a majority. The Liberals called an election in Nova Scotia. They wanted a majority. They got their pants
beat them?
spanked.
Who spanked them?
So why did the Liberals call this election? They want a majority, and not
tell you why.
to bring in climate change methods, not for daycare. They want to bring in crushing austerity, and they don't want any opposition to that.
Okay.
We have to deny
Thank
them
you.
that
I want to just
majority.
go to the people who've been trying to get in. So first of all, Chylow Hall, and then Les Schram. Go ahead.
So the reason why the People's Party is growing so quickly is because the Conservatives, as an official opposition, did nothing, stood up, helped the Liberals push everything through, they're trying to pit people against each other based on their vaccination status. And they're trying to push vaccine passports. Do we want to be in a country where we're segregating portions of society? We're not allowing them to participate in work, go to a restaurant, go to a movie theater, provide for their families? Is that the kind of Canada that we want? No. We need open discussion. We need debate. We need science. We need to look at how effective is this vaccine? Is there going to be booster shots? These things are all important to Canadians instead of just steamrolling ahead and rolling in the vaccine passport, which is scary for many people because many people, even though they've been vaccinated, do not like the idea of booster shots every 6 months, which is very around the corner. That's something that is happening in Israel.
Okay.
It was reported today in the U.S. Thank
So
you.
let's go next to Les Schram and then
Okay,
Huda
so
Mukbil.
it's a really good question as to why they called the election in the middle of COVID and why they made the focus of the election COVID. And I think it's because they thought that COVID was their strength, that they'd done a remarkable job in reducing the incidence of COVID. Among vaccinated people, the rates of COVID are really down, and the serious cases are virtually nil. But the reality is they weren't talking about the things that people really cared about, and they didn't want to. And one of them was climate change, because they didn't want to talk about the UN report on climate change. They didn't want to talk about what Bill Gates had to say or Mark Carney had to say. They didn't want to recognize that 27% of our emissions are coming from the oil field. And they didn't want to talk about that because they have no plan to reduce the emissions from the oil field. They didn't want to talk about affordable housing because their plan is an utter failure. In Ottawa, we're building affordable housing units that are affordable to people who make $48,000 a year, not affordable to somebody who makes $30,000 or $20,000. So they didn't want to talk about these issues. They wanted to talk about what their strength was, which they believed was COVID-19, and they were wrong.
All right, Huda Mukbil, go ahead.
People are angry. They're angry because affordability is an issue. The housing crisis is a major concern. Homelessness is everywhere. In Ottawa South, we had 110 of Ottawa South citizens going to the food bank because they could not afford to eat. Our seniors are living in poverty. And so there is a crisis. And what the Liberals wanted to do is sneaking an election, and they thought the polls were in their favor. That's not the case. It's not the case in Ottawa South as well. People are upset. Going door to door, a lot of people want change, and that's really needed because we need a government that we can trust. That's not going to sneak in an election when everyone else is not paying attention. And they've just released their platform just a couple of days ago because they know that now people our attentions are for 2 weeks. So in this 2 weeks, please be informed. Please know that the NDP has your back on social issues, on social justice, on climate change, and other issues.
Never forget also that the PPC leader, Maxime Bernier, came in a very close second. He's just as conservative.
He's not conservative.
He's just as conservative
we have a
as
very
Aaron
liberal
O'Toole.
platform. We are just
Okay.
against the
That's time.
lockdowns and the mandates.
Thank
and they
you,
should be
that's time.
accounted for.
David McGuinty, I asked you the question, so we go back to you for 30 seconds.
Thank you very much, Mark. I do want to thank my colleague from the NDP for sharing with viewers that we did release our platform. In fact, it's the only costed platform of all political parties in the country. I asked my NDP, Conservative and other colleagues to deliver up their costing and get it approved by the Parliamentary Budget Officer so Canadians can make their own decisions about how serious they are about their costs. We are now involved in a pandemic of the unvaccinated. The most important thing we can do is get vaccinated and protect our children, protect our classrooms, and move
That's
forward.
done. Thank you. All right, next question is to Larry Wasslen from the Communist Party of Canada. We've touched on this issue already. I want to talk about affordability. Many Canadians, of course, are concerned about the rising cost of housing and other essentials, but successive governments have had a hard time resolving this issue and making life more affordable for Canadians. There are jurisdictional issues and many other obstacles. So what specifically could a federal government do in the next few years to make life more affordable for Canadians?
Going door to door in Ottawa South, 8 out of 10 people say housing is the critical issue. Many families in Ottawa South are paying 40 to 45% of their income on shelter alone. This is, after the Second World War, the federal government got into the housing business. They built houses for the veterans coming back. They made it affordable. People got to move into those houses, raise their families there. What we need is a government that puts the emphasis on building homes for the Canadian people. That will allow rents to come down and housing prices to come down as well. Thank you very much.
Okay, it's open to everyone on this topic now, on affordability.
The Conservative Party have a great plan to help Canadians get affordable housing. There's 37,000 buildings across Canada owned by the government. We want to take 15% of those and use that for affordable housing. There's 2 good sites in Ottawa South, the National Defence Medical Centre and the Heron Road site are available. We also want to encourage 7 to 10-year mortgages for first-time home buyers and remove the stress test when a homeowner renews a mortgage with another lender when they're staying as opposed to staying with their current lender, so it creates a competitive situation.
What is causing this housing crisis? It's foreign investment. The immigration bracket, and we're talking about not allowing 400,000 immigrants in, and rather 100 to 150,000 immigrants, because this is causing an increase of housing costs. It's a supply and demand issue. We plan on addressing the issue.
I'm going to take offense here because immigrants in Ottawa South, you're talking about the most diverse riding, full of immigrants who are here working very hard.
I'm not coming
working hard and contributing to this economy and the
they
growth
are.
of Ottawa
They
South.
are. And
I myself am an immigrant to this
That's
country,
not my issue.
and
It's the
I
fact that we have
contributed
one at a time,
significantly
please.
to this country. So that is not a problem. Do not make it into an immigration
Supply and
issue.
demand
It is
is a
not.
problem
The housing crisis is a government issue. We have the highest. In all of the G7, we have the highest rate of housing problem here. And it's
Why?
because we have
Because supply and
developers that are pushing marginalized communities right here in Ottawa South, in
And the
Heron
other
Gate.
problem is
And we,
investing
as
in
an
Canadian
Okay, one at a time,
MP, you need to be
resources.
advocating for them. You need to be advocating for the people of Heron Gate and other
They want to be
communities,
able to afford
and they're
a
here
house
to
like
contribute.
everyone else. And by allowing more and more people in so they can't afford a house is advocating for them, for Canadians, for our
Blaming
children,
immigrants.
for new people.
Blaming immigrants for a failed policy run by developers in this country is absurd.
That's
It's
right.
absolutely ridiculous to make a statement like that. The immigrants are not responsible for the huge amount of
portion.
mortgage debt that Canadians have. The
it's
immigrants
foreign
are not
investment.
responsible for the fact that rent is 40 to 45% of their income. It's the capitalist ruling class that is doing that, and there are many supporters of the capitalist ruling class at this podium tonight.
We want to reduce
We need
cost.
to put the working class in charge of this item.
We need to put
Thank you.
Canadians
In the
first.
last-
We
in the
need to
last
build
several-
more
okay,
homes.
last-
We're
in the
going to be
last several
building
years-
half
All
a
right,
million homes.
no one can hear anything you're saying because you're all talking at
in
the
the
same
last
time.
several
So
years-
let's,
Our government-
Les Schram, go ahead, please.
We need immigrants. They bring skills to the table. We
Thank
don't
you.
have enough
If they're
skilled
brought
workers.
properly.
Thank you.
Okay, please don't interrupt.
Immigrants have always done wonders for this country, and they continue to do wonders for this country. If anything, they're underemployed because they're discriminated against. I met a man the other day on the street, and he was an expert on sustainable development. He had represented his African country in Geneva. He'd represented them in Rio, and he has no money because he can't be employed in Canada, and the only reason for that is because of his race, plain and simple. So what do
I
we do
work
about
in
that?
national security.
Let's
Should be
back to-
economic-
I think the
economic
question was
benefits.
about
If I
housing.
may, let's get back to the issue of
question was about
I
affordability.
want to talk about affordable housing.
Question was about
the
housing.
Liberals have been in power for
So,
6 years, and the housing crisis
I'm very
is worse.
pleased. I'm very
Okay.
pleased that over the last several years, we have announced and created Canada's first national housing strategy. Over $72 billion has been provided to build and to make housing more affordable. We're going to move forward now with a new rent-to-own program for Canadians. We created the Canada Housing Benefit Agreement. That is an agreement with the provinces and territories. That's helped over 300,000 Canadians pay rent. We introduced the first-time home buyers incentive. We've created the first national tax on vacant property owned by non-resident non-Canadians. We launched the Rapid Housing Initiative, $2.5 billion to create at least 9,200 new units. And right here in Ottawa, I was pleased to help contribute $165 million to Ottawa Community Housing to retrofit 11,000 of the units which they own.
Well, the Liberals are doing some good things, and that's really wonderful. We're getting net zero houses, but we still don't have enough houses. 31% of Canadians make less than $40,000. Most couldn't afford a bachelor apartment. None of them could afford a one-bedroom apartment of any quality.
Because of
we
foreign
have to build
investments.
a lot more affordable housing, but while we do that, we also have to start building up their wages, and we have to start reducing the taxes on low-income earners. It's ridiculous
Okay.
that somebody that makes $28,000
time.
is paying tax.
All right, Larry Wasslen, I asked you the question. You get the last 30 seconds on this. Thank you.
So all of these so-called market solutions will do nothing for the average working class family, the poor. So what we need is aggressive action by the federal government to build 1 million units of affordable housing, get into the construction business, build the houses, put people to work. There is absolutely no room for this sort of white supremacist nonsense about immigrants. Thank you.
Okay.
Immigration
We'll stop
affects
there. Thank
the
you.
housing market.
We'll stop there. Thank you. We'll move now to the closing statements from each candidate. We have 1 minute for each candidate to appeal to you, the voters in Ottawa South. And we'll start with Larry Wasslen from the Communist Party of Canada. Go ahead.
This election, the choice in this election is clear. Exploiters are well represented on this stage by the lying Liberals or the terrifying Tories. The very disappointing NDP are, in fact, a wannabe Liberals dreaming of replacing Trudeau. The NDP is betraying any notion of working class solidarity by including landlords and CSIS agents as their candidates. The struggling Greens are hampered by the belief that capitalists dressed in green suits can solve the ever-worsening climate crisis. And then there is the Communist Party of Canada, Canada's revolutionary party of socialism, which offers a solid working-class option to put people and nature before profit. Vote Communist is but step one. What's really important is for you to organize yourselves against the exploiting bosses and the blood-sucking landlords. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. David McGuinty, representing the Liberal Party, you're next.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us this evening. There's a lot of work left to be done for our country and for our riding. I've had the great privilege of representing Ottawa South for almost 17 and a half years. More recently, I've been able to provide dramatic support for Chylow's Navigator system to help our newest neighbours navigate through Chylow's pediatric system. I'm working with Chylow's board now to create a one-door for care proposal. I've worked with the Ronald McDonald House both here and around the country to get additional support for housing when families come to Ottawa to get Chylow help. I've been working with our medical professionals to give them help with permits to bring in foreign medical specialists for our people here in Ottawa South and around. I've been working with our women's shelters, our food bank on Heron Road. I've solicited and obtained $4 million for the Boys and Girls Club on Hetherington Road to reach out to thousands of young people. I'm asking for your support to continue to work for you. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Next is Eli Tannis from the Conservative Party.
The budget will balance itself. I don't care about monetary policy. Who said that? The Liberal Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The Conservative Party care about monetary policy. High interest rates, high inflation is a hidden tax. It increases the housing market. The Conservatives have a plan. We have a 5-point recovery plan. Deal with jobs accountability, secure the country, secure the economy, and one that's dear to my heart, mental health. Our family faced a mental illness. We lost our sister due to mental illness several years ago, and we worked in conjunction with Solace House to build a mental facility residence in Ottawa South called Karen's Place. The Conservative Party pledged to spend $325 million to build another 50 homes like Karen's Place.
That's time. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Keeping
That's
1,000
time.
residents.
1
Thank you
minute
very
per
much.
candidate. Thank you. Les Schram, you're next, representing the Green Party.
So far, the election has been about COVID-19, cost of living, and health care. And these are all important issues that must be addressed. And we have plans to expand health care, provide more affordable housing units, support our students and graduates, have better mental health care, support small business, defend our water supply, make agriculture more resilient, and improve our social safety net. However, the elephant in the room is climate change. The UN has stressed that we are now in a global climate emergency. Climate change affects us all. It's a health issue. It's a livability issue. To stop warming the climate, we have to reduce the production of oil and gas and their emissions, and reduce emissions from transportation and so forth. The Green Party is the only party with a realistic and affordable plan to reduce emissions from the oil and gas fields and reduce emissions from consumptions. If you care about global warming and sustainability, you will vote green. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's go next to Chylow Hall from the People's Party of Canada.
I just want to address the racist comment. Addressing immigration as one of the issues of the housing crisis is not being racist, it's just addressing one of the issues. In closing, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms was created to keep the government in line to protect the people. What has unfolded in the span of 18 months in the name of COVID-19 was largely lawless, causing more harm than good. While campaigning, I have heard we must do the things for the greater good. This is wording and terminology utilized by dictators and tyrants to circumvent inherent human rights. In the news recently, Israel and the US have stated that there will be a need for booster shots every 6 months. This means that to be able to fully participate in society, you will need to be up to date on your booster shot or your vaccination status will expire. It will become a never-ending cycle of allowing the government to violate your bodily autonomy in order to keep your job and provide for your family. Do we, as Canadians, want to segregate and discriminate a portion of society? The PPC are not anti-vax. We are a party founded on 4 pillars.
That's time.
Freedom.
I'm sorry, that's time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Huda Mukbil from the NDP, your closing statement.
Okay, we have not said that we are on the unceded, unsurrendered territories of the Anishinaabe First Nation Algonquin people tonight, so I want to say that first of all. Secondly, I want to say that going door-to-door canvassing, I'm disheartened. Just this morning, I met Noha, who is disabled. He did his part. He studied and has a post-secondary education, but is unable to gain employment and feels isolated. And we all know now what being isolated means. And Noah's isolated because we have an Employment Equity Act that's 25 years old that has failed him. It has not been updated, and our understanding of disability now has changed dramatically. But it also changed on women issues, on racialized communities, as well as Indigenous Canadians. We need to update the Employment Equity Act, and that's something that I promised him. Inequalities are the problem. They're the problem to crime. They're the problem to social justice issues need to be addressed. Mental health, disabilities, all of these issues, housing crisis. So we need to do better. Vote for the NDP.
Thank you, candidates, for participating in the debate. And thank you for watching our debate in Ottawa South. And tune in to Rogers TV for coverage of the local results on September 20th.